Bite down! Bite down! Before I get started, I actually originally had this video idea a couple years ago, but didn't really know how to make it or release it. Anyways, thank you for the 230 subscribers. Let's get into this video. One of my favorite scenes from Avatar is when Zuko fails to generate lightning. Well, not only is this a good scene because his failure and shame is expressed through his bending, but because he literally generates an explosion. And yeah, we do have combustion bending, where people are able to fire fucking missiles out their head. But we've never seen anyone create an explosion or backfire in the same manner that Zuko did. So we go through some of the sub-elements. We know combustion bending is a thing. We know lightning bending is a thing. Whether you want to include lightning redirection as a sub-element or a sub-skill, it doesn't really matter. And yeah, he failed at creating lightning, but he created something totally different that we haven't really seen. And this accidental discovery of this ability could very well be another sub-element of fire. Whether it's new or it was something undiscovered that could possibly be lost to time. And you know what? I might be gassing this, and I might be reaching. But because this man just IED'd himself using firebending, I gotta take interest into it. There's two groups we can put this ability into. It could be some type of incomplete, unfinished version of combustion bending, or it could be the main point of this video. It could be its own separate sub-element of fire. Now at this point in the video, you're probably wondering, what's the difference between combustion bending and explosion bending? Isn't it just the same thing with a different name? Well, kind of, but not really. The thing is that the Avatar community kind of just labeled combustion bending as like a synonym for explosion bending, obviously because it creates an explosion, but for the show's sake, it's only called combustion bending. It's never once called explosion bending. So by that, I could just completely theorize it as a new sub-element for firebending. I remember on Reddit when someone tried asking if this backfire that Zuko did was combustion bending. Someone pointed out that it wasn't because it didn't have the pop sounds that the usual combustion bending that we've seen had. I actually talk about that a little bit later. This person tries to argue that Azula has already done it. The explosion right up to when she's going against Gang and Zuko and Iroh. This is an explosion created just by her element. This is an explosion created by her element coming into contact with Aang's element. As you see here, Aang is bending air. We know what happens when air and fire get up into really close proximity in the Avatar verse. It creates an explosion. We saw that with Zuko and Aang. I don't think this is a example of Azula doing it. So yeah, this is still something unique to Zuko. Azula has not done this. This was more likely than not just her element coming into contact with another element that created an explosion. Like I said, we already saw that happen before. But now you're probably wondering, how does this accident become a sub-element? First, we have to look at what makes a sub-element. A sub-element is a element that you use in a different form. So ice bending is the sub-element. You're still bending water, but it's in the form of ice, so a different form. So where does explosion bending fit into the form and the element? Well, it actually works somewhat the same as combustion bending. The explosion wouldn't just come purely from the fire. Most explosions in general just come from the sudden, the rapid rise of heat. In this case, this heat would be generated by his firebending. So what he probably did, instead of lightning bending, Zuko most likely used an extreme version of heat bending, tries to rapidly condense it and focus it out in one area, and then boom, explosion, bending. There you have it. Now when it comes to the use of the element, it's very limited. I'm trying to figure out if there's any way to actually make this advantageous in like an actual battle, because we've only seen it once, and that one time you saw it, it blew up in someone's face. I guess for now we just have to settle with the fact that, in theory, it is a new sub-element of fire. So hypothetically, who could explosion bend? Well, we probably have to look at some of the firebenders at their most conflicted moments. So we already saw Zuko do this after he got banished. For Azula, it would probably be when she was being haunted with her mother's presence in book 3. With Iroh, it would probably be when he lost his son, Luten. It wouldn't really work for Ozai because he was never conflicted when he actually had firebending. Now, Zhang would most likely be able to explosion bend. His whole character in the beginning is just about how ashamed he is to be a firebender and how he participated in the Fire Nation army and trained a ruthless killer, General Zhao. And now it's safe to say this nigga right here would by far be the most talented combustion bender. The way he was freaking his ass out the whole entire 4 seasons of Legend of Korra, there's no doubt Mako would be a pro, maybe even a legend at explosion bending. So how would you be able to consistently explosion bend in a way that you could use it like in a fight? You'd have to be constantly mentally unwell, always conflicted. Basically, in order to explosion bend, you'd have to be like Zuko or Mako.